When the modern mind travels into the past, it often paints the Middle Ages in the warm colors of a sumptuous banquet. In the mind's eye, one sees roasted wild boar bending under the weight of its own fat, golden wine flowing into silver goblets, and fresh, fragrant bread being broken on rustic wooden tables. This romantic glorification, nourished by films and novels, is a dangerous illusion. If a human being of the 21st century were transported back to the year 1250 without preparation, the immediate threat would not be the sword of a knight or the plague. The true enemy would lie on the plate. The biological reality is sobering. The digestive system of the present, pampered by pasteurization, cold chains, and hygiene standards, would face a microbiological war it could not win. The first and perhaps deadliest adversary hid within the most fundamental of all foods: bread. Grain was the basis of existence. It provided up to 70% of daily calories. Yet the grain of the Middle Ages was not the pure, selected product of the modern agricultural industry. On the damp fields of Europe lurked a parasitic fungus that primarily infested rye, ergot. For the medieval peasant, it was often impossible to completely separate the black, toxic growths from the healthy grain. The flour ground from this harvest was contaminated with highly potent alkaloids. The consumption of this bread led to a creeping poisoning known in the Middle Ages as St. Anthony's fire. The symptoms resembled a nightmare. Blood vessels constricted, leading to a burning pain in the extremities, as if hands and feet were in flames. In advanced stages, limbs died off and fell, blackened from the body, often without bleeding. Added to this were hallucinations and delusions. A modern human, whose body possesses zero tolerance for these toxins, would suffer severe neurological failures after just a few days of consuming this bread. What began as satiation ended in agony. Yet even if the bread was free of ergot, the sheer composition of the food posed a challenge. In times of need, and these were the rule, not the exception in the Middle Ages, flour was stretched. Unscrupulous bakers or desperate housewives mixed sawdust, tree bark, or even chalk and soil into the dough to increase the volume. The modern gastrointestinal tract, conditioned for easily digestible fibers, would react to these indigestible additives with severe inflammation and bowel obstructions. A bowel obstruction was a certain death sentence in the Middle Ages, and it would remain so for the time traveler, far removed from any surgical intervention. If one leaves the field of plant-based food and looks at meat, the scenario becomes no less threatening. Refrigeration, as we know it today, did not exist. Meat consumption was a race against decomposition. As soon as an animal was slaughtered, the decay process began. To slow this down, or to mask the taste of spoilage, methods were used that can be toxic to the modern organism. Curing was the most common form of preservation. Meat was layered in barrels with salt, often for weeks. The salt content of this meat was astronomically high. For the medieval human, who performed hard physical labor and sweated profusely, this was tolerable. For the modern human, however, the sudden consumption of such quantities of salt would derail the electrolyte balance. The kidneys would be overloaded, blood pressure would shoot to life-threatening heights, and dehydration would, paradoxically, set in while eating. Even more dangerous, however, was meat that was not cured. The so-called high game, or hautgut, the strong, gamey taste prized by the nobility, was often nothing more than the first stage of decomposition. Game was frequently hung for days until it was tender, a euphemism for bacterial decay. In the kitchens of the nobility, cooks attempted to mask the taste of rot with expensive spices from the Orient. Pepper, cinnamon, and cloves served not only for enjoyment, but for disinfection and the deception of the senses. But spices do not kill all toxins. The bacterium Clostridium botulinum, the agent of botulism, found ideal conditions in poorly smoked sausages or insufficiently heated stews. While the medieval population had developed a certain resistance to specific germs over generations, or simply accepted a higher mortality rate as a given, the modern immune system possesses no memory for these pathogens. A single meal of slightly spoiled pork could trigger food poisoning that, through massive fluid loss, would lead to circulatory collapse within 24 hours. An often overlooked aspect of the medieval kitchen is the danger posed by the cookware itself. In wealthier households, food was cooked in copper cauldrons or vessels made of tin or pewter. Acidic foods, such as stews with vinegar or wine, reacted with the metal. In copper cauldrons, verdigris formed, a highly toxic copper salt. Pewter was frequently contaminated with lead. The result was chronic heavy metal poisoning. Lead poisoning leads to anemia, kidney failure, and severe disorders of the nervous system. The Swedish taste of lead acetate, also known as lead sugar, was even appreciated in wine to make acidic vintages palatable. The time traveler would thus be confronted not only with bacteria, but also with chemical poisons accumulating in the body with every bite. Besides solid food, water was a source of certain death. The theory that no one drank water in the Middle Ages and everyone consumed only beer or wine is an exaggeration, but it bears a core of truth.